loves. So, last night I didn't get to do scary story time. I was having a really hard time. I got lots of sleep last night and things are looking up a little bit. I feel much better. So, I'm going to do scary story time tonight, and I chose to talk about Jack the Ripper because he's one of my, it's one of my, not he, but it's one of my favorite stories, like, ever. So, we're going to do the full story of Jack the Ripper, okay? It is late at night, and a woman walks down a dark street alone. Out of the fog, a shrouded figure approaches her. She hears gentle footsteps and turns to face him. The attacker's hands close around her neck, choking her until she is unconscious. He then crouches over her, pulling out a 12-inch blade as he does so. Minutes later, she is discovered dead by the police. This is the work of Jack the Ripper. I promise I won't do that accent the whole time. It just sort of comes out sometimes. But anyway, the murders of Jack the Ripper are known throughout the world as being one of the most famous unsolved serial killings in history. Like ever. Right, Fedward? Fucking ever, man. Ever. At least 5 women met their end at the hands of this unknown man, and some believe the number may be as high as 11. Some of us who have studied it even more believe that there was more. I'll tell you later. How did the tale begin? Okay, Mary Ann Nichols was a prostitute who worked in the Whitechapel area of London in 1888. At 3:40 in the morning, on the 31st of August, she was found dead on the corner of Bucks Row with deep slashes on her throat and her abdomen brutally cut open. This is the first of 5 murders that happened over 3 months from August to November 1888. The murders were of Mary Ann Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, and Mary Jane Kelly. All of the victims were prostitutes in the Whitechapel area, and almost all of them displayed the same method of killing. One of the strangest things about the killings was that each body was missing vital organs. When the police found the victims, these 5 murders are commonly known as the Kenosha 5. So who was the Ripper? Well, since the murders in 1888, no one has been successful in identifying the culprit, although many people have been named as suspects. Actually, there's been 5. I'll get into that later. The problem the police faced was that there was very little in the way of crime scene investigation back then, unless the attacker left a personal item at the scene which could be tracked back to them, or if someone was able to give a detailed description of them. The police had very little chance of finding the right person. The Ripper seemed to know this too. He planned his attacks to take place at night and far away from any prying eyes. This is probably one of the reasons why he chose to attack prostitutes. Back in the late Victorian era, prostitution was illegal and people selling themselves had to conduct themselves discreetly. Any customer would be led to a quiet area of the town where the woman knew they would not be interrupted by the police. But these quiet places were also a perfect setting for the murders. So why was he called Jack the Ripper? Well, this name came about through the newspapers. This was the first major murder story that had international appeal, so journalists would try everything to boost public awareness. One unscrupulous journalist wrote into a newspaper pretending to be the killer and signed the letter as Jack the Ripper. The name caught on because of the accuracy of the name with the gory details of the murders. Although the letter was later uncovered as a fake, the world sees the sensational name the press had given to the killer. So how did the investigation go? Well, I'll tell you. The mystery of the Ripper case has never been put to bed. Even to this day, people are still fascinated by it. Yeah, it is. This is why, in 1986, the FBI created a detailed psychological profile of Jack the Ripper to see if they could find the culprit by looking through the records from the time. The profile took into account geographical situations, motives, required knowledge, any psychological prerequisites and potential psychological attributes. Once the mold had been cast, all that was needed was to trawl back through the case notes and report to see if anyone who had been suspected fitted with the profile, and someone did. Someone fit the fucking profile. Over the years, there have been many different theories about who Jack the Ripper was. Some claim it was a Whitechapel mortician called Robert Mann, who examined the bodies after they had been found. One of the more outlandish theories is that it was the famous novelist Lewis Carroll, author of Alice in Wonderland, for making anagrams of Jack the Ripper in his books. Some people also believed the Duke of Clarence, grandson of Queen Victoria himself, had a hand in it. Prince Albert Victor was rumored to have had a child with a woman who lived in Whitechapel. The belief is that the royal family and the government tried to remove any evidence of the child by killing it and anyone who knew about it. I mean, that kind of shit happened all the time, so yeah, I could see that happening. The most probable suspect of the Ripper case was young American who came over to England in 1888. Francis Tubletti arrived in England 2 months before the first canonical murder. Canonical, I don't even know how to say that word, but we're just going to go with murder, happened. And when compared to the profile, we see that he matches it almost perfectly. Tubletti was staying, excuse me, he was staying near Whitechapel, so had local knowledge. He was trained as a medical assistant, so he had the necessary skills to find organs and remove them quickly. He left his wife when he found out she was a prostitute and was believed to harbor a hatred for women. This gave him a motive for the attacks. That sounds really likely, very likely. Sadly, anyone who had evidence of who Jack the Ripper was is dead now. And with the murders being more than 130 years ago, most of the evidence is now so contaminated that it can't provide much insight. But more than that, with all potential suspects now dead, getting a confession from the real Ripper is now impossible. As a result of this, Jack the Ripper's real identity will almost certainly never be known. On the contrary, I'll be back. Okay, so we're back. I had to do a quick little check on something, and we're going to go over the 5 most likely Jack the Ripper suspects and the facts against them. And then maybe you can make an educated decision on who you think Jack the Ripper was, because he's probably dead now. For sure, he's dead now. Okay, the Jack the Ripper murders in London's East End, also known as the Whitechapel murders, have been an enigma since as far back as the Victorian ages. The mysteries surrounding the identity of the infamous London serial murderer have become as complex as the murders themselves, and the London police, as well as people from all over the world, are still speculating on Jack the Ripper's true identity. It is believed that Whitechapel Jack was behind the murders of Mary Ann Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, and Mary Jane Kelly, God rest their souls. However, some believe that Jack the Ripper could have been responsible for up to 11 separate murders in London between 1888 and 1891. After interviewing over 2,000 people, investigating 300, and detaining 80 others, the London police were still dumbfounded as to the real identity or identities behind all these atrocious murders. During the course of their investigations, however, police narrowed down the suspects to several men, though none were formally charged. Here are 5 of the most likely suspects behind London's Jack the Ripper murders, as well as the facts against them. Okay, first we have Montague John Druitt. Although there may not be any concrete scientific evidence against him, the fact that the Jack the Ripper murders in London's East End ended after Druitt's suicide convinced one London detective, Melville Leslie McNaughton, that Druitt was in fact Jack the Ripper himself. Montague John Druitt was an Oxford-educated man from a fairly good family, although some believe that he was sexually insane. I don't know what that means, but like, was he just like super horny dude, or I don't know what that means. I'll have to look that up. He was born in Wimborne Minster, Dorset, and during his lifetime he once worked as an assistant schoolmaster in Blackheath, London. Many experts believe Druitt was behind the murders, as they are convinced that Jack the Ripper was a Whitechapel local. Druitt resided a few miles away from Whitechapel on the other side of the Thames, and he was also seen in the Whitechapel area around the time of the Jack the Ripper murders as well. On November 9th, 1888, 7 weeks after the murder of Mary Jane Kelly, which is believed to be Jack the Ripper's final murder, Druitt's body was found floating in the Thames. Investigators believe that the cause of death was a suicide, and that he had been at the bottom of the river for at least several weeks, around the time of Mary Jane Kelly's murder. Suspect number 2 was Karl Feigenbaum. Another likely suspect behind London's Jack the Ripper murders was the 54-year-old German merchant sailor Karl Feigenbaum. Feigenbaum was known to be a psychopath who confessed to mutilating women, and even his own lawyer believed that his client was Jack the Ripper as well. Feigenbaum went by many aliases during his lifetime, as was known to be working as a merchant on ships that had been docked near Whitechapel. Records prove that Feigenbaum was working in the Whitechapel on every single date of the 5 Jack the Ripper murders in London's East End, and he and his co-workers were often seen at the nearby brothels as well. He's definitely I'd say a high suspect. Yeah. Aaron Kosminski. It's a funny name. Anyway, several highly esteemed police officers believe that the Polish barber Aaron Kosminski was behind the Jack the Ripper murders in London. And the fact that his mitochondrial DNA was found on Catherine Eddowes' shawl certainly doesn't help his case. That's big. That's huge. Kosminski was born sometime between 1864 and 1865 in Russia, and had settled in London in the early 1880s. Kosminski was Jewish and was living and working as a hairdresser in Whitechapel during the time of Jack the Ripper's murders. Jack the Ripper murders. I'm a little tongue-tied today. He apparently had a very strong hatred of women. He had homicidal tendencies and was even sent to an asylum in 1889, where he died shortly after. Police documents from the time of the Jack the Ripper murders revealed that officials suspected a man by the name of Kosminski, although Aaron Kosminski wasn't pinpointed as the suspect until many years later. So, okay, and we got Francis Craig. In recent years, many ripperologists, I like how they made their own word of that, that's very adorable. Let me adjust here. Ripperologists have started believing that Mary Jane Kelly's husband, Francis Spurzheim Craig, was behind all the Jack the Ripper killings in London. Craig was working as a reporter at the time of the murders, and was even covering the police courts and inquests on the Whitechapel murders, as well as other crimes in London's East End. Craig was born in 1837, was the son of a well-known Victorian social reformer, and some people suggested that Craig was suffering from a mental illness, or more specifically, schizotypal personality disorder. So basically he was schizophrenic. He lived in Whitechapel on Mile End Road, which is just 7 minutes away from the first Jack the Ripper murder scene, and in 1884 he married Elizabeth Weston Davies, who is believed to have been a prostitute who went by the name of Mary Jane Kelly, Jack the Ripper's final victim. Theories suggest that once Craig discovered his wife was working as a prostitute, she went into hiding at the East End under her pseudonym. Craig Craig started plotting her murder, but disguised his involvement by killing other prostitutes in the area beforehand. Very feasible, don't you think? Walter Sickert. In the book Portrait of a Killer, Jack the Ripper, Case Closed, author Patricia Cornwell pinpointed artist Walter Richard Sickert as the real Jack the Ripper, and even claimed to have found DNA evidence which linked Sickert to at least one of Jack the Ripper's letters. But even before her book, Sickert was believed to have been behind the Whitechapel murders since as far back as the 1970s. Sickert was born in Munich in 1860 and emigrated with his family to London in 1869. Sickert was known for painting prostitutes, and some believe that he used to insert clues and symbols about Jack the Ripper murders into his own artwork. I would actually really like to take a look at those myself. Okay, good. Some experts suggest that the clues are so similar to the actual crime scenes that only the true murderer could have painted them. It is also believed that Sickert was impotent after having several surgeries on his penis. That's enough to make anybody angry. Experts have always suggested that Jack the Ripper may have had some kind of impotence problem, which is why he targeted prostitutes so violently. Many serial killers throughout history have been proven to be impotent or suffer from sexual problems, as the act of killing becomes their only means of sexual fulfillment. That is actually true. I learned that in psychology. It's crazy. Cornwell also found mitochondrial DNA on several of Jack the Ripper's letters, which were a match to several letters written by Sickert, but it still wasn't enough to convince experts that Sickert was behind London Jack the Ripper murders. Unfortunately, Sickert passed away in 1942, and he took his many secrets to the grave. He took everything to the grave. So, what do you, out of those 5, who do you think was most likely? My guess was Carl or Aaron Kosminski. I think it was one of them. In fact, I think there was a recent thing posted maybe just a couple years back that they do believe it was Aaron Kosminski who was the true Jack the Ripper. I don't think we'll ever 100% know. I even thought at one time, a long time ago when I first started researching this, I thought at one time that there was more than one Jack the Ripper. Like, they had some sort of elite club going on, and it could have been all 5 of these men. Shit, we don't know. But they had like an elite club going on, and they were just all like women-hating bitches, you know, and they would go around the streets of London and just kill all the hookers, you know. Sad. It's fucked up. What's really crazy is I feel like back in those days, you could get away with almost any crime because of the lack of technology and shit like that. So, and I don't know if you know this, it didn't really say in there, but Jack the Ripper's weapon of choice was a knife, the Liston knife, which looked like a really long scalpel, had like a scalpel end with a longer handle, sharp as fuck, and from 3 of his victims, well, I only found this from 3, but from 3 of the victims, he had actually taken some of the organs out and he kept them. One was a heart, one I believe was a liver, and the other was a kidney. Yeah. We don't know exactly why he chose to take these organs out and keep them. A lot of serial killers believe that those organs harvest whatever made the victims special, and so they wanted to keep those. So it was almost like a control thing. They felt they had control even post-mortem. Sick, yeah. Y'all sick. Sick and twisted. Anyways, so that is Jack the Ripper. There's some movies out about him. I'm blanking on the title right now of the one that I seen. It was actually really good. And I'm not just talking about like documentaries, I'm talking about like movies, you know, made. I'll have to find it and I'll have to add it to this post in case you guys want to watch it. Yeah, so let me know in the comments how you like this story, if you have anything to add to it. It was a toss-up for me tonight, like doing H.H. Holmes, which was known as America's first serial killer, and I know a lot of shit about him. He's very fascinating to me. Or Jack the Ripper, and tonight I decided to do Jack the Ripper, so that means that next week we're probably going to do H.H. Holmes, and oh my god, there's so much shit. We'll get into it next week. But yeah, let me know how you like this. If you didn't like this, let me know some other topics that you would like to hear about. It's not Sunday, but it's Monday, so Mondays kind of suck, I know. But I hope everybody has a great week. Stay happy, stay healthy, and I love you all. And so does Fredward. He's a stinker. Night. Love you.